Hi everyone, welcome back. I hope you're happy and well. So for a little while there has been a trend for corsets, which I am wholeheartedly all here for. I love corsets. Mostly because of the ties into fantasy fashion, but they're so good, aren't they? There are plenty of videos and TikToks that I've seen of how to make a corset, but most of the ones I've seen are to make corsets that kind of look like this. And don't get me wrong, this type of corset is pretty cool, but, and I'm in no position to be sure of this, I think they're probably not great for bigger chested people. I'm not one of those people, but just in case, I decided to make a tutorial of how to make a corset that would fit anyone, whether they have a small chest or a big chest. And I've made it as beginner friendly as possible, so let's go. First, you'll need either narrow paper tape or to cut masking tape into narrowish strips. I only cut my masking tape into halves long ways because I couldn't make it any narrower. Also, I recommend only using mediums lengthed pieces here. It'll be better for maneuverability. Next, while wearing fairly fitted clothes, take a piece of tape and stick it to yourself from as high as you want to just past your belly button. The next piece of tape should go over your nipple area and stop at your waist. Having said this, I should reiterate that you need to be wearing clothes during this. It will be important later. The next piece of tape should connect the bottom of the previous two in a half V sort of shape. The next piece of tape is a good time for personalization. You put this tape to connect the top of the two vertical pieces of tape. You can experiment with modesty in different shapes here. I went for a simple, very modest curve, but if you wanted the corset to have a cool pointy shape or to be more revealing, this is the time to adjust it. The next piece of tape goes right over the side seam of whatever you're wearing. And then for this last part, you might either need some help or to just laugh at yourself a little bit. Use one piece of tape to mark where your spine is, and then use more pieces of tape to connect the top and bottom of where the other pieces are to it. And then it should look a little bit like this. For this next part, you'll either need a scrap of very sheer fabric or a plastic bag. And this is also where it's important that you're wearing clothing and not just sticking the tape to your skin. You need to pin the scrap fabric or plastic bag to your clothing, covering the areas of the tape. You'll need to be able to see the tape and your clothing through whatever it is that you're using. Once the plastic bag is pinned to your clothing, use a Sharpie to trace over where the tape is underneath it. Try to be as accurate as possible, but it can be fixed later. Unpin the plastic bag and lay it somewhere flat. Cut out the pieces, and you should end up with 3 pieces that look a little bit like this, unless you've added your own personalization to it. Next, you'll need tracing paper of some kind. Perhaps baking paper or greaseproof paper. It is best if it's a thin kind of paper, not a printer sort of paper. And that's also the reason why I didn't use paper straight onto the body to draft this pattern. Plastic bags and things drape over the body a little bit better, and that way the pattern is more accurate. Lay the tracing paper over the plastic bag and pin in place. Then trace over the rough lines from the plastic bag onto the tracing paper. This is a good time to be more precise. Using a ruler can be helpful, except on the side panel. One side of the side panel should be curved to match your chest curve, so don't use a ruler there or it just won't work properly. Repeat this process for all 3 pieces. Once you've traced all the pieces, you need to add a seam allowance. If you don't do this, the corset will just end up that much smaller than what you actually need, and there are a couple of ways to draw a seam allowance. I've seen a trick where you tape 2 pencils together and trace around the outside of the pattern, but that's not quite precise enough for me, so here's how I do it. I use a ruler and mark 1.5 centimeters or an inch away from the edge of the pattern, and then match all the dots together. On the front part of the pattern, the part that was the middle of your chest, draw this symbol to remind you that that part goes on a folded part of the fabric. You might also want to label it, and on the other side from the fold lines you might want to write that that's where the side panel attaches. For the side panel I labelled it side and wrote on the side seam that the back panel was connected there, and on the back panel I wrote that it was the back and where the grommets went as well. Next, pin each pattern piece to your fabric. Remember to put the front part on a fold. The other pieces don't need to be on a fold, but you should end up with 2 identical front pieces, 4 side pieces and 4 back pieces. I use black fabric for both the inside and the lining, but you could use different fabric for either one, which would mean that you would have one front, two side and two back pieces in your outside fabric, and one front, two side and two back of your lining fabric. Open out the center front and you should have an elongated heart sort of shape. Pin the curvy side of the side panel to one side of the centerpiece. You can sew this in place now or wait to pin it all together. It's up to you and how confident you are at sewing. Pin and sew the back pieces to the outside edges of the side piece. Don't forget to use the seam allowance that you gave for yourself. Once all the pieces are sewn together, iron the seams flat so that they look like this, both the outside and the lining. Also, now is the time to hold it up to yourself and adjust the fit if you need to. Make it a little bit bigger, make it a little bit smaller, whatever you need to do. Once you've sewn and ironed all your pieces, lay them out nice sides together with the seam spacing out and pin both layers together. Make sure to match each seam to the same one on the other panel. So match the side seams together and so on. Once it's all pinned, sew along the top and bottom, leaving the sides open. I sewed this with the foot of the sewing machine on the edge of the fabric so that I didn't lose too much length. But this will depend on your preference. Once you've sewn it together, you need to clip the curves. This is so that when you flip it to the right way out, the fabric on the inside will sit flat. To do this, carefully snip in small-ish increments around curves, being careful not to accidentally snip the stitching, and then you can flip the whole thing the right way out. Use an iron to press the corset into its proper shape. Once you've done that, you'll need to top stitch it around the entire thing, again leaving the sides open. This means to sew right on the edge of the garment, as close to the edge as you can. It sort of holds everything in place and adds a bit of stability. I recommend going really slowly and adjusting as you go. Finally, the bones. Many other sewers, I like to use cable ties for bones. I don't think I've ever actually seen or used proper boning in corsets. This one has steel boning because I bought it from a professional place, but cable ties are more accessible and cheaper. You want to get the really long ones, not the little short ones. The short ones just don't work as well. I got mine from a cheap shop, but you can probably also get it from a hardware store or something like that. I drew the lines where I thought I should put the boning. This is another thing that is up to your preference, but I do recommend at least boning the side seams and at the back where the grommets go. But I also put one right in the front to keep the pointy bit at the bottom pointy. So draw the lines where you want the boning, 2 lines of either side of where they should go. If you're copying exactly how I'm doing my boning, sew along one side of the center boning panel, but only one side, no other panels yet. Measure how long you need the boning to be so that it will fit inside, and snip the cable ties as needed. If you want to, you can have 2 or more cable ties in a boning channel to make it extra stable. Reach inside the open part of the corset and slide the boning in until it's vertical and close up against that line that you just sewed. Once the cable tie is there, pin it in place as closely as possible without going through the cable ties. Very slowly and carefully sew the cable tie boning in place. Then repeat this for all the other channels. To deal with the open ends, simply tuck in the excess fabric inside and then pin it and sew it in place. Finally, the grommets. I didn't film this, but it's pretty easy to do. Grommets come in a little kit of their own. All you really need is a hammer. So there should be a longer bit of a grommet and a small bit of a grommet. Snip where you're going to want the grommet to be, but just a tiny bit, and slide the longer part of the grommet inside. Then put the other side, which is usually like a flat disc with a circle in the middle, and put that over the other side. So the tool that comes with it, there should be one side that's more curvy, and you put that on the disc side, which by the way should be on the side that you don't want people to see. So put the half of the tool that has like a little channel, a little valley over the side disc, and the other part of the tool over the other side, so it's all like one sandwich, and then very carefully hammer it. This will just, it'll do its thing and it'll work out well, I promise. Although I would recommend testing it if you've never done grommets before, and then you just lace up the corset and it's done. So I hope that was easy enough to follow. If you make a version of this, please tag me on Instagram at @thefebear so that I can see it, and I'll see you next time. Bye!